Tokyo, October 1968. The Tokyo Motor Show. Somewhere in that crowd stand engineers from Kawasaki, and they are having one of the worst days of their professional lives. Because up on Honda's stand, under the lights, sits the CB750, a transverse four-cylinder engine, disc brake, electric start, a motorcycle from the future, ready for showrooms. And the Kawasaki men are staring at it because, back home, locked away in their own development shop, they have been secretly building almost exactly the same motorcycle. A 754, their masterpiece, their moonshot. Honda just beat them to it. In public, with cameras rolling. So Kawasaki's engineers went home, and they made a decision that would define the entire decade of the 1970s. If Honda owned the revolution, Kawasaki would own the crown. They took their dead 750 project back into the shop, enlarged it, added a second set of camshafts, and aimed it at one target, not matching the CB750, but burying it. 4 years later, it emerged as the Kawasaki Z1, 903 cubic centimeters, the fastest production motorcycle money could buy. And from that moment until right now, this evening, in your comment section, riders have been having the same argument at every gas stop, swap meet, and bar in America. The Honda that changed the world, or the Kawasaki built to conquer it. The CB750 or the Z1, which was really better. Tonight we're settling it, or more honestly, we're arming both sides properly. Because this is one of the great arguments in motorcycling, and great arguments deserve real ammunition. First, the champion of importance, and let's be clear about what the CB750 was when it landed in American showrooms in 1969, because familiarity has dulled the shock. Before it, a fast motorcycle was a compromise you signed for. British twins that vibrated and leaked and demanded devotion. I've told that whole empire's story elsewhere in these pages. Harleys that belong to a different mission entirely. The CB750 arrived with a specification that read like science fiction at the price. A smooth inline 4, an engine layout from Grand Prix racing, now with an electric starter your wife could thumb, a front disc brake, the first on a mass-production motorcycle when most of the world still squeezed drums, and reliability so absolute it was almost unsettling. It started every morning. It didn't leak. It held its tune. At around $1,500, it cost less than the temperamental British machines it embarrassed. The road testers of the day reached for the same word until it wore out: revolution. The CB750 didn't beat its competitors. It made them historical. And America bought them by the shipload. Commuters, tourers, first-timers, and, mark this, thousands of men stepping off British bikes with a strange mix of relief and guilt. The CB750 rider of the early 70s was the sensible revolutionary. He'd done the math. He wanted to ride on Sunday, not wrench. And if you've seen my video on why Japan builds better motorcycles, you know the manufacturing story underneath his confidence. His Honda was the smart man's superbike, fast enough to frighten anything from Britain, civilized enough to commute on Monday, and dependable enough to bet a vacation on. For about 3 years, the CB750 stood alone at the top of the world it had created. Then Kawasaki's revenge arrived. The Z1 hit America for 1973, and it did not come to join the party. It came to end it. The 4 years between Tokyo humiliation and American revenge deserve their own beat, because Kawasaki's engineers did something rare in corporate history. They got more ambitious after losing. The secret project, known inside the company by a code name that translated wonderfully as New York Steak, because it was aimed squarely at American appetites, could have been rushed to market as another 750 within a year or two. Kawasaki refused. Second place to Honda with a matching bike was worse than no bike at all. So they waited, enlarged, refined, and armored the thing until it wasn't an answer to the CB750 anymore. It was a sentence about it. Where Honda had built a 750, Kawasaki built a 903, because matching the CB750 was never the point. Humiliating it was. Where Honda used one overhead camshaft, Kawasaki used two, pure racing architecture on the street. The result made around 80+ horsepower against the Honda's high 60s, and the numbers on the road were the kind that got a machine confiscated in polite conversation. The fastest production motorcycle in the world, full stop. A bike that would run deep past 120, that set endurance records at Daytona to prove the speed wasn't fragile, and that could be ridden to work all week and drag raced on Sunday without opening the toolbox. And the Z1 had something beyond numbers. It had menace. The CB750 was handsome the way an achievement is handsome. The Z1 was handsome the way a fighter is. That hunched tank, those four pipes, the sense that it was leaning forward slightly even on the side stand. Kawasaki had already built a reputation for lunacy with its two-stroke triples, the Widowmakers I covered in the two-stroke story, and the Z1 was that same wild blood, finally given discipline. The Z1 rider was a different man than the Honda man, and everybody at the gas stop could tell them apart. He wasn't buying transportation with a bonus of speed. He was buying the fastest, and the word really in tonight's question was invented for him, because whenever a CB750 owner talked about refinement and reliability, the Z1 man would nod politely, let a beat pass and say, "But which one's faster?" And for the rest of the 70s, nobody had an answer. The Z1 and its descendants wore the crown Honda had forged. Honda built the throne. Kawasaki sat on it. But this channel doesn't settle arguments with brochures, so let's do what we always do. Go stand where the decision actually got made. The showroom floor, 1973. Picture the buyer, because plenty of you were him. A working man with roughly $2,000 of savings and financing courage, standing between two Japanese machines that had just made every other choice feel like the past. The Honda sat there at around 1,500, proven now. 4 years of reputation behind it. The safe revolution. The Kawasaki sat across the aisle at around 1,900, newer, bigger, faster, with that faint air of a loaded weapon. $400 separated them. 2 weeks' wages, give or take. And the salesman, if he was honest, and in that handshake era plenty were, would ask one question that decided everything. What do you want it for? The men who answered everything bought the Honda. The men who answered with a grin bought the Kawasaki. And both walked out certain they'd outchosen the other, which is precisely the certainty they've been defending ever since. Owning a CB750 in the 70s was, by every account of the men who did it, the first time a powerful motorcycle asked nothing back. Oil stayed inside. Electrics worked in the rain. The engine would idle in traffic all August without complaint, and the disc brake stopped you with 2 fingers where your old Bonneville had wanted a prayer. It would carry a passenger and luggage across 3 states, commute all week, and never once make you kneel on cold concrete to earn Sunday. Its flaws were the flaws of civilization. It was heavy. It was a little soft at the very top, and to the hooligan wing of motorcycling, it committed the one unforgivable sin. It was sensible. Some men traded their British twins and all in a quiet corner of their heart, missed the drama forever. Most got over it by the second winter that the bike started on the first press. Owning a Z1 was owning the king, with a king's temperament in one specific area. That mighty engine was genuinely bulletproof. The record books proved it. But ask any honest Z1 man about the chassis in the early years and watch him smile. All that power lived in a frame doing its level best, and a Z1 ridden at full anger could get expressive. The faithful didn't consider this a defect. They considered it a filter. The Honda, anybody could ride fast. The Kawasaki, you had to earn, and in the tribal arithmetic of the 70s parking lot, that earned speed counted double. And the tribes marked themselves the way tribes do. The Honda man's machine stayed stock or grew touring gear, a rack, a windshield, saddlebags for the long hauls. The Kawasaki man's grew a 4-into-1 exhaust by the second summer, and maybe a quarter-mile time slip taped inside the garage door. At the drive-in, at the diner, at the gas stop, you could read a man's entire motorcycling philosophy from 50 feet by which 4 he'd parked. 2 machines, one built to be right, one built to be first, to the horizon anyway. And 50 years later, both tribes are still standing at that gas stop. So let's call it. Here's the honest resolution, and like every honest resolution on this channel, it's going to make both sides half happy. The Honda CB750 is the more important motorcycle, and it isn't close. It redrew the entire map. It made the inline-4 the default architecture of the sport for 50 years. It put a disc brake and an electric start on the world's expectations. It finished the British industry's argument, and every superbike since, including the Z1 itself, exists downstream of that Tokyo stand in 1968. Machines that change history get remembered differently than machines that win it. The CB750 is in the first category, and the first category is smaller. And the Kawasaki Z1 was the better motorcycle, by the measures motorcyclists actually feel in their hands. Faster, stronger, more charismatic, more thrilling, built to a target the Honda itself had made possible and then exceeded in every direction that quickens a pulse. If the CB750 was the moon landing, the Z1 was the moon base, the thing you build once somebody has proven it can be done, and build better. So, the Honda won history. The Kawasaki won the stoplight. The CB750 is the motorcycle you'd send to a museum. The Z1 is the motorcycle you'd send to a fight. And the beautiful, infuriating truth is that the argument has no floor beneath those two facts. It comes down to what you believe a motorcycle is for, which is exactly why your fathers argued it in 1974, and exactly why you're about to argue it below. For what it's worth, and only because you'd call me a coward otherwise, if I could have exactly one of them in the garage tonight, brand new, 70s fresh, I'm taking the Kawasaki and riding it very carefully. And I fully expect half of you to be right when you tell me I'm wrong. Both machines, by the way, got the last laugh together. Clean early CB750s, especially the first Sandcast case bikes, and original Z1s now trade for the price of new trucks, sitting side by side at auctions the way they once sat at stoplights, still being argued over, just with paddles instead of throttles. So now it's your turn, and this comment section has been 50 years in the making. Which side were you on? And more importantly, why? If you owned a CB750, tell me about the day it replaced whatever it replaced. If you owned a Z1, tell me the fastest you ever honestly went, and whether the frame forgave you. If you owned both, you're the judge tonight, and the floor is yours. Honda or Kawasaki? The revolution or the king? 50 years of argument. Settle it below.